Welcome to GospelKorea. How important is free speech to you? What if the state controlled what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say? Would you be okay with such an intervention and perhaps surveillance of censorship of your comments on your social media? Would you be okay if some group of people got offended by what you said on your Facebook 10 years ago and Facebook decides to delete off that comment from your wall because it's stimulating hatred? Well, at least according to their viewpoint. What if you are penalized for what you said, which according to your perspective is completely reasonable and normal, but according to some people, it's offensive? I mean, wouldn't you think you deserve the right of freedom of speech just like everyone else? And especially those who oppose you? On this video, I'm referencing a commentary titled, "The Hate Trap, Are We Free to Hate?" Which was published on 18th of November 2016 by 폴콜맨 from Alliance Defending Freedom, or ADF International. This is not a news article, but it's a script of one of Coleman's speeches that he did. And the link of the article is in the description for you. And I strongly suggest you go and read the whole article or whole commentary yourself because it's really good. In this commentary, Coleman addresses the inconvenient truth of free speech versus hate speech. Quoting directly from Coleman, he said, "How do we draw the line between unhateful speech or unhateful free speech on the one hand and hateful criminal speech on the other hand? Surely this is the bare minimum we should ask for from proponents of hate speech laws, and yet clear dividing lines are impossible to find. And the reason it's impossible to distinguish in any meaningful way between free speech and hate speech is because the concept of hate is entirely subjective and always moving." And I couldn't agree more. He's correct in saying that the concept of hate is entirely subjective and always moving. I love how he phrased this, actually. So basically, we might hear the same thing and we might look at the same thing, but I might get offended and you might not. And what is perceived to be hateful changes as time goes by. So the values you have held on to until now have made you a narrow-minded, bigoted, and hateful person in the last 10 years. But those values used to be regarded as virtuous, respectful, and normal. Your values haven't changed, but now it has become a crime to hold on to those values. Or at least you have to be really careful who you share your opinions with in the fear of penalty. Freedom of speech means you are free to express your thoughts without being penalized for expressing those thoughts. If you love something, you're free to say it. If you hate something, you're also free to say it. And there are certain degrees of restriction on this freedom, of course, set by the law in many countries to guide the public to take responsibility of what they say. For instance, if you willfully make a racist remark directly against someone in front of you, then in many democratic countries you can be persecuted. But these restrictions do not breach the overall context of freedom of speech. But there's this movement of hate speech laws. It's reducing the range of expressions and vocabularies we are allowed to use year after year. Like what Coleman said, the problem is that we cannot distinguish what is hate speech apart from that if someone gets offended by what you say, then you have committed a hate speech crime. But think about it. How can you possibly understand how everyone around you feels? If a bypasser overheard you and got offended and you didn't even know that person was there, yet you have just offended that person, therefore you have committed a hate speech crime. This just doesn't make sense. And however, this is what's been happening in reality. Coleman defines hate as whatever the state chooses it to be. That's exactly it. So if the government says your values and your expressions are now hateful, then you are guilty. So that makes the concept of hate speech laws very powerful tool to those in authority. They can implement it as seem advantageous to them in each case. They can suppress the opposing views by framing them as being hateful. People will not be able to voice out their opinions in the fear of being penalized. Christians won't be able to preach the gospel at its entirety in the fear of being charged and penalized. The hate speech law is becoming untamable, and adopting this in Korea only means we haven't learned from the mistakes of other nations, and we practically have to make the same mistake ourselves in order for us to learn. So, back to the title of the article. Are we free to hate? Yes. Just as we are free to love, we are free to hate. But the real important question is, should we hate? And no, absolutely not. Jesus told us to love, and he showed us the perfect example of love. Though we have the freedom to hate, we must choose to love and never hate people. Just because some people are cursing Christians doesn't mean we need to curse them back. We can choose to love. To close, I just like to say this, that we Christians must defend our freedom of speech with love of Jesus Christ, not with human strength, not with human wisdom. For when we are weak, he is strong. Jesus loves you.